Views and or opinions expressed on the Fox Paranormal Chat are just that. Any topics of discussion during a broadcasted show is in no way the exclusive view nor opinion of the hosts or any Webb Radio Network staff. You're listening to the Fox Paranormal Chat on the Webb Radio Network. And now, Michael and Destiny Fox.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jessica. You feeling better?
Hey. Much better.
Good. We missed you last week.
I missed you guys too. I didn't think I could make it through without coughing the whole time.
We have Kobe with us, and he just had surgery today.
Hey, everyone.
And they were reading.
I don't know how he's here.
I don't either. Dilaudid, Percocet, Demerol, something. They named off a bunch of pain meds they gave him.
He sound asleep.
He has not been asleep. So look at my halo. Isn't it pretty? I just shine.
You're an angel.
Yes. We were talking earlier, and we have I got a notification, somebody else's live show. Jessica and I were talking earlier today about ghost stories, and her mom told her about a story, and I researched and read about this for about an hour before our show tonight and earlier today. It is a fascinating story.
It really is. It's a very, very fascinating story.
And I found an in-depth story on it, like from beginning to end. And I sent it to you. I don't know if you had time to look at it. You probably already have. But the green fire.
I did not. I've looked at a lot of the articles.
Yes.
This last one actually had the
so last July, my mother and I. It's really interesting. Last July, my mother and I took a trip to West Virginia, which is where I'm from, to go put flowers on her father's grave and my grandmother's grave. And her father just happens to be buried in a little town called Sam Black Church. It's in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. And we passed through this town named Clarksville. And she's like, oh, this is where the guy testified about the Greenbrier ghost and got a murderer convicted because he had a ghost telling him who killed her. And initially they thought that she'd had a heart attack. Her name was Elva Hester Shue. And this happened in 1897 or 1898. It's a very old story. But as the story goes, the doctor came to try to save her, and her husband was like, oh, you've done enough. Just stop. And she died. And then she started talking in spirit to a person, and for the only time in history, they allowed that person to testify in court about what the spirit was telling them happened to her. And it's a really fascinating story.
It really is. I found the court documents on it. It was amazing. I had never heard of it before. I had seen a movie before about a ghost that helped solve her own murder. It wasn't this story. But could you imagine? That's just, I'm amazed by this story. I really am. I'm fascinated with it. To think that if I could be if I know I could be murdered, but if I were murdered, that I could come back in spirit and tell somebody what happened, which is exactly what happened in the story.
What's really interesting in this story, when I was reading, the information about it, is that okay, the person that the ghost visited was her mother, and her mother lived 14 miles from the crime scene. So the spirit had to go 14 miles to go to her mother, but she visited her mother 4 times, and on the 4th visit, she was able to communicate and tell her mother what happened.
Her mother really,
it kind of, and her mother should have. But it kind of answers one of our questions a little bit. Is the ghost tied to where it died? Is it tied to where it's buried? Or can they travel? And in this situation, she traveled 14 miles to tell her mother her story. And multiple times she appeared there to tell the story. So it's very fascinating from that standpoint, too, because it kind of answers a question we ask a lot. Are they tied to one place?
That was my question too, Jessica, when I was reading that. And in fact, I brought that up to Destiny when we were going over the information on the story. This kind of, verifies for us that these spirits can travel. Because this spirit traveled 14 miles to the other side of a mountain.
But it may not have traveled. It could have just been attached to the mother.
I don't know.
Specifically came back to her mother rather than just because she died there, you think that's where she had to stay. I mean, I don't know.
Apparently she wasn't tied to the property she died on, because she was able to go 14 miles to the other side of the mountain to have a visitation with her mother, not once, but 4 times. Which is interesting, because her mother.
The funny thing is,
her mother testified that the first 3 visits she really wasn't communicating, but it was the 4th visit that she was able to communicate and actually tell her mother what happened.
And the prosecutor in the case really tried hard to shoot down, because she was their star witness. The attorney tried really hard to trip her up in her testimony, but her story was very on point and so believable that he wasn't able to tear her up on cross-examination. When you have a witness of this magnitude that seems like, oh, well, we're going to be able to get her unreliable, and then you go in there and you can't. I'm sure that was a real hit to his ego. It's like he got beat by a ghost.
Yeah. You're freezing up just a little bit, and I think there may be a little time delay in there, but
we'll work through it. But what people's got to realize, as far as I can find out, this is the first time that a visitation like this was actually admitted in court as evidence.
Yeah. And whether you believe in ghosts or not, it's a fact that a ghost actually is in the law books about this case. It's a documented case.
And a court accepted it as evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of proves that if a court of law can accept it as evidence, doesn't that establish jurisprudence on the existence of the paranormal?
Well, a lot of people still doubt that, because maybe the mother thought it was suspicious. Here her daughter is laying in her casket, and maybe her head's bobbling back and forth. And then she notices, let me go back and explain this a little bit. let me go back and find the beginning of this, and we'll just start from the beginning. When I find it here. When she died, he actually um, made sure that nobody saw her neck or her head. He stayed right with her, hovering over her the whole time. Even when the doctor examined, he would not quit holding her head close to his chest, and he was in anguish. Um, the doctor tried, but it was beyond all help. But she was actually dead from a broken neck, which they pretty much passed it off as she died from a faint. Like back in those days, I think women could just up and die from just being a woman, maybe.
Well, they believe that.
Just faint, and then we could die. I mean, in our own kitchen. But hang on, let me find it. So the whole time that her body is being examined, he's holding her neck. And even in the coffin at the funeral, he actually was there at the head of her casket and would not leave the head of her casket. So the whole time, her husband is trying to conceal that he had murdered her. And there's a story here of what actually happened. During the first days of January in 1897, Mrs. Shue fell ill. For several weeks, she was under the care of Dr. J.M. Knapp. Shue appeared very attentive to his bride's need, giving no cause of suspicion of what was in his mind. Early on the morning of January 22nd, he appeared at the cabin of Aunt Martha Jones, mother of Anderson, to ask if the boy, if her boy could go to his house and attend to some chores for Mrs. Shore. Shaking his gray head, Jones clearly recalled that memorable day. Um, he actually testified in court, and so it went on, and he went ahead and went there. And when he got there, he felt something was wrong. All the doors were closed, and there was an air about the place that he recalls that he did not like. Reaching the steps, he said he saw a trail of blood, and that scared him. But he went to the door and knocked, and no one answered. He tried it, and finding the door unlocked, walked into the kitchen. The trail of blood continued across the floor in the dining room, and the door was closed too. Now, somebody that dies of a deep faint, there's no bleeding, okay? I've
Shouldn't
never
be.
heard of anybody. I've never heard of anybody dying from fainting, um, but he stumbled across Mrs. Shure's body. There she was, stretched out on the floor, looking right at him, eyes wide open. She seemed okay. Cut it off on me. I was frightened, but I was able to reach down and shake her, and she was stiff and cold. Running from the house, he ran across the field to Aunt Martha, saying, "Sure is dead." As she ran to the house, he went down the road for Mr. Sure, finding him at the blacksmith's shop with Charles Tappet. And then he told him what he had found, and he yelled when Mr. Tappet started for the house, and he continued to get Dr. Knapp. When they reached the house, Sure had taken his wife from the floor, placed her on the bed, held her head in his arms, crying for her to come back. But strangest of all, although no one thought of it at the time, he had dressed her, placing one of those old-fashioned high stiff-neck collars around her neck and holding it in place with some kind of scarf. So it's clear he was trying to conceal that she had a broken neck. So he tried and tried to revive the woman, um, but her husband still continued holding her head, refusing to let the doctor examine it. Finally, the doctor turned and said it was an everlasting faint. Her heart had failed. So all this is talking about how he concealed the murder. The next morning, her body, accompanied by her husband and several neighbors, was taken over the mountain. On Monday, she was buried in the little family cemetery high up on the side of the mountain. Before the funeral, her husband never once left his wife's side in the presence of others. When not at the coffin, he permitted no one else to go near it, not even her mother. You know, I don't know about this, but I watch a lot of CSI and murder crimes and murder mysteries. Look, he would have went to jail that day in present times.
Yeah,
but they could get away with a lot more back
his
then.
behavior was very sketchy.
Exactly. But in addition to all that, he even placed a sheet folded on one side of her head and a garment on the other. They served to keep it in an upright position. Okay, this man is clearly having to put things on his wife to keep her head propped up. And nobody is suspicious. That everlasting faint took her out. Several days after the funeral, Mrs. Hester was awakened from her slumber by a noise in the little cabin room. Startled, and this is her mother, she recalled constant prayers since her daughter's death, seeking the real solution to it. Maybe they were about to be answered. Peering through the darkened room, she made out an object. It was her daughter, dressed in the very dress that she had died in. The young girl seemed about to speak, but when her mother reached out her hand, seeking the coffin, the girl disappeared. So, and it goes on to say that her daughter explains in detail how she was murdered. I wonder why she couldn't do it on her first visit, though. I get the sense that maybe she couldn't speak. Or I told Michael earlier, I said maybe she was afraid she would frighten her mother if she tried to come on too aggressive and tell her this all at once.
Well, you know, some people might say that she was, maybe for the first 3 days, she was still in her transition point, you know, becoming a spirit on the other side. And maybe she didn't have the energy to speak or didn't know how to pull the energy to speak until the fourth day.
That's true. And people that I've talked to that work in funeral homes, okay, the body lays in state usually 3 days. Your traditional funeral, like you go one night to visitation, maybe a second night. Back in the day, we had those 2 nights, and then the third day was the funeral.
Yeah.
And during those 3 days that a body would lie in state in the funeral home, some funeral home workers have told us that they've actually seen the person in the coffin, an image of them actually standing at the head of their coffin, looking into their coffin. So, you know, you could have something there, Michael. Yeah. Maybe it takes a little time to move on to your next place.
Maybe, you know, maybe for the first few days, they're trying to understand what happened to them.
Exactly. Okay, but then the next night, the very next night, she resumed her prayers, praying long and earnestly that her daughter would return and explain her death. Once more, they were answered. Mrs. Shure talked more freely, giving her mother to understanding she should be acquainted with the whole mysterious affair. A third visit was followed by a fourth before the murdered woman told her mother the entire circumstances surrounding her death. But she was already secure in her knowledge that her son-in-law was the murderer. Sometimes as mothers, we just know stuff.
She sensed it. She
just
knew it.
Know things.
Yeah, she knew it.
A mother's intuition usually never is wrong. At first it was, so she set out to trap him. So she goes around and she starts telling all of the neighbors this unusual story. And I'm pretty sure, you know, if somebody come to me telling me something like that, I'd be like, yeah, right. Okay. But several days later, Johnson, I guess I'm saying this right, Hester maybe, a brother-in-law, satisfied that the story had some foundation to it, went over the mountain to talk with Shure. Their conversation further aroused his suspicions. Then, after talking with Anderson Jones and others who had been present at the house when his niece's body was found, the uncle was convinced the girl was a victim of foul play. Together, him and his sister-in-law went to Lewisburg for a conference with the prosecuting attorney, John A. Preston, one of the most brilliant attorneys of his day. So here we go. We're trying to take a story to a prosecuting attorney because a mother has had a visitation by her murdered daughter.
Yeah.
Could you imagine the look on their faces and what the neighbors must have thought? Like, this woman is grieving too bad. Her daughter has been murdered and she's wanting her alive so bad that she's probably fabricating the fact that her daughter came to visit her.
Can you imagine the look on the prosecutor's face?
Yes.
Probably like utter shock, like, you're kidding, right?
Couldn't believe it.
Dumbfounded.
Well, I think, I think he suspected something had happened besides a fainting, but they had no evidence.
An everlasting faint.
Because the doctor that did the post-mortem couldn't fully examine the body, so he just called it a heart attack, or a failed heart. But the key was when she was able to convince the prosecutor, and they were able to go and exhume the body so they could do a proper post-mortem.
Interesting. So did your mother
The whole
go
story is
did she go into any in-depth of things that she knew about the story when your mom told you the story?
so no, she didn't. She was like, "Oh, we need to look up about the Greenbrier ghost." Well, then we went to Sandstone, West Virginia, which is where my grandmother's buried. And when we came down out of the cemetery where my grandmother's buried, it's on top of a mountain. At the bottom of that mountain is the New River Gorge National Park Visitor Center. And so we stopped there to use the bathroom, and we went in to look around at the visitor center because I had never been inside. And while we were in there, we found a ghost story book from the area that someone had written, and the Greenbrier ghost story is in the book. And she was like, "Oh, it's in here! It's in here!" She was so excited. But yeah, she didn't go into a lot of detail until she got the book, and then in the car while I was driving, she was reading it out loud in the car. So she was really like, "Oh, I didn't know this." So the lady that was murdered, she was from a little town about 14 miles south of Lewisburg. Lewisburg being one of the bigger cities on Interstate 64 heading towards Lake Virginia from West Virginia. And Lewisburg's the county seat of Greenbrier County. And everybody knows Greenbrier County. If you ever seen the movie Wrong Turn, it's supposed to be placed there. So, all my relatives are allegedly like inbred or whatever, but it's not true. It's not really like that there. But there's a lot of folklore that surrounds a lot of things there, from, spirits seen in coal mines to the Greenbrier Coast. That's like the first time a court accepted a haunting as evidence.
Exactly. Well, as the mother told the story, of course, you know how fast gossip spreads. It spread like wildfire. Now, the girl's mother was before him, secure in her efforts to trap a murderer, firm in the belief that what she had to tell was true. Her brother-in-law also was there to add his suspicions gathered from the neighbors. For several hours, they conversed. And then when they concluded the meeting, Attorney Preston started the wheels of justice moving toward one of the strangest and most fantastic murder trials ever held.
I would agree with that after reading the transcripts.
Yes, there's some transcripts
Yes.
that we'll get into later. But first he questioned Dr. Knapp. That kindly old physician admitted his verdict of heart failure as the cause of Mrs. Scher's death could be wrong. She had been ailing, but circumstances surrounding her death had even given him some cause for suspicion. Both men agreed that an autopsy would prove whether or not her strange theory was true. If it was not, the examination would at least serve to relieve the aching heart of a saddened mother and throw unique suspicion from the shoulders of Scher. The next day, they went to Lindsay's mill, informed Scher of their plans, and ordered him to accompany them over the mountain to his wife's grave. In addition, they took Aunt Martha and little Anderson along. Scher vigorously protested against such action, but dared not refuse to accompany the little investigating party. Throughout the long journey, he kept murmuring, "I don't know what in the name of God they are taking her up for. They are not going to find anything." But he was wrong. They reached the grave. They ordered several neighbors to exhume the body. Such action, although commonplace today, had never been heard of in Greenbrier County, so it was the only after considerable argument and threats of arrest that Preston succeeded in having the coffin raised from the grave and carried up the road to the schoolhouse. The autopsy was done. The physician searched for poison, but they couldn't find any poison in her system. He worked over, and these are things that he should have done the first time. He worked over the body for 3 days and nights, seeking a cause of death. I'm thinking, if he lifted her up, her little head would have shown. I mean, we're talking about this is sometime after she was dead. It would be so obvious, you would think, to see that the woman had a broken neck. So during the whole thing, he Scher sat on a packing box, whittling with his knife. And Anderson Jones was there during the entire investigation. On the third day, Dr. Knapp was about to give up when he made a startling discovery. And it was just the way her mother had predicted. Dr. Knapp was working around Mrs. Scher's head, and he could see, is it Shue? Yeah, Mrs. Shue was getting more nervous. His whittling was not so good. Suddenly, the doctor turned to Mr. Preston. They whispered together for a few minutes. Then Mr. Preston said to Shue, "Well, Shue, we have found your wife's neck to be broken." His head dropped. A change came over him, but it certainly proved his guilt.
And she died exactly like that the ghost described. Like when she told her mother how she died, when they exhumed the body, that was exactly how she had died.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Which validated the mother's claims of being visited by a spirit. She had too much information at that point that was given to her.
Well, the trial lasted about an hour. In the opening argument, Attorney Preston told the jury that the state's case against Shue was entirely circumstantial, but that the evidence was such as had never been presented in any court before. He stressed that the dream testimony could be presented and would prove beyond any doubt to be authentic, and informed the jurors he could prove it. Boy, now this is going to, I can imagine what the judge is thinking while he's sitting there.
Oh,
okay, you're going to prove to me that a ghost came to her mother, explaining to her what had happened.
Well, I can see him questioning that, because that's pretty far-fetched. But what was interesting was when they did the postmortem, it validated everything the mother said that the spirit told her. And her testimony during the trial, she was very precise with every answer when she was asked a question by the prosecutor. Her testimony was right on there.
And to think that her daughter came and described her own death at the hands of her husband.
Yes.
And I want to tell you something too. This wasn't his first wife. She was actually his second wife. His first wife died from mysterious circumstances.
Yes.
They should have exhumed her body as well. There is no telling.
So it makes you wonder if he killed her also.
So
Probably
a woman
did.
that kills her husbands is called a black widow. What do you call a man that kills his wives? Black widower?
Probably.
Psycho?
Psycho, yes.
Yeah. Probably it sounds like he might have been a little bit of a serial killer.
And I'm just sitting here wondering if y'all hear those noises outside the door.
I've been hearing them.
Oh, okay. I was just...
Yeah.
We're actually next to your guest bedroom when you come and visit with us. So, and you know what goes on around in here. So
Towards the fellowship hall or towards the back of the church?
Back.
Toward on the side the mini house is on. Yeah. But anyway, I've got some little things here. Rucker asked Mrs. Hester, did you not have a dream that aroused your suspicions to lead you to have the body exhumed? She answered, I had no dream, for I was as fully awake as I am at this moment. He said, and did you not have a dream or vision that led you to have the body exhumed? She said, well, I was not satisfied that my daughter came to her death from natural causes, so I prayed that it might be revealed to me how she died. After about an hour spent in prayer, I turned over, and there stood my daughter. I put my hand out to feel the coffin, but it was not there. She seemed to hesitate to speak to me, then departed. The next night, after I prayed again, the manner of her death might be shown. She appeared and talked more freely, giving me to understand that I should be acquainted with the whole matter. The third night, she appeared again and disclosed more to me. And on the fourth night, she returned and told me all about the difficulty, how it occurred, and how it was brought about. So she is. I'm about to read y'all this whole story that she says her daughter told her. She says Zona told her mother he came that night from the shop and seemed angry. I told him supper was ready, and he began to chide me because I had prepared no meat. I replied there was plenty, bread and butter, applesauce, preserves, and other things that made a good supper. He flew into a rage, got up, came toward me. When I raised up, he seized each side of my head with his hands, and by a sudden wrench dislocated my neck. So this is how she described what happened to her. She continued the remainder of her answer. Then my daughter went on to describe the home where she lived and surroundings in the neighborhood so that it was fixed in my mind as a reality. When I later described it for people living nearby, they told me they could not have been more accurate themselves. And she told me I could look back at Aunt Martha Jones in the meadow in a rocky place, that I could look in the cellar behind a loose plank and see. Her house was a square log house. He'd ride up to the square, and she said for me to look at the right side of the door as you go in the right hand corner. I saw the place exactly as she told me, and I saw blood there just as she had told me. So her daughter was able to describe in detail what happened to her. That is so amazing to me.
Which means the ghost had full awareness of what happened.
Right. Now, when I'm visited by loved ones that pass on, whether it's friends or relatives, I know I'm in a dream state. I know I'm dreaming. And that's how they come to me. But she says that her daughter stood before her and she was just as awake as we are right now.
Excuse me.
Amazing.
The whole story's amazing. I mean, she was only 31 when she died. So, she should have been, fairly good sound health at 31 years old.
Well, she went on to stress that these were not visions and they were not dreams. And actually, he was convicted of her murder.
That's what was interesting, the whole story, because it said the jury deliberated and found him guilty of first-degree murder.
Right. So, it makes me wonder, when we're investigating the paranormal, if some of these people are still there trying to tell us their story, what happened to them. Well, I know that they are. But what if each time we went to an investigation, the spirit could tell us all about how they died, where they lived, what they went through? That would be amazing. As evidence, we get bits and pieces sometimes full sentences. Can you hear us, Jessica?
And yeah, I'm sorry. I have a really laggy internet this evening for some reason, and I'm trying to solve the problem.
Well, that's one reason
in the
we're
event that
next
we
door
ever,
and not at home. Ours lags and cuts out.
It kind of makes me wonder, though, after this story, and it was in such detail, and it's so documented in court records, that maybe we need to change up a little bit of our line of questioning when we do an investigation.
Well, I'm prone to say, if there's anything, this is my method. Is there anything you want to tell us? Is there a message that you would like to give us to give to somebody?
Yeah.
So, it's like my line of questioning is, we're there to help a client, but if we can help a spirit that's possibly trapped at this location, well, heck yeah.
Well, I've always felt the spirit's a client too. When we take on a case, I feel like, we're also taking on the case of the spirit.
Oh, yeah.
So
I can agree with
so
that.
we have, I feel like we have a certain responsibility to the entity that's haunting the location.
Right. We had a difficult case not too long ago. The former people at this residence were Latino, and most of the EVPs that we got was in Spanish. So it was hard for us to communicate too much. We did get some in English, but it seemed like the majority that we got was in Latino. So what we could pull up, we've tried to decipher and try to figure out what the spirit is trying to tell us. So that's kind of difficult. A lot of people think you can go on a location in another country and that spirit's going to speak English, maybe they can, but sometimes they can't.
I mean, I think it's foolish for us to assume that they speak English if English wasn't their language when they were alive.
Right. So, which is why Michael uses his Google Translate.
I translate.
Whichever, it's all the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I use iTranslate. In fact, we used it quite a bit on that case that she was just talking about. Asking questions in Spanish. And we would ask it in English, and I'd have iTranslate say it again in Spanish. And I wonder if that's not why we did get the EVPs we did get in Spanish, because we were doing that.
Yeah, because Michael would ask a question and iTranslate would speak it in Spanish, and the responses came back in Spanish. Poor Jessica's having all kind of problems over here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is,
I'll tell you what, it's a rough night on my internet.
oh, we've had those nights too, to the fact where before we started doing the live stream, and we would be not completely off the internet. So
Yeah.
the building we're in now is just, it has better internet. I don't know why it's better.
Well, the sad part is I have like one gig speed, but it's not coming in at 1 gig.
No, they never does.
No, they don't. We pay for high speed internet, but we don't get its full capability. Oh, well, you're paying for the
We should pay for what we
highest
get.
speed you can get, but you're just not able to get it all out here. So the disadvantages of living out in the country, we don't even have cable. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, we're so used to satellite, so.
Yeah. Dish Network. We have Dish Network and AT&T Internet. But this story intrigued me. And how many other cases are there? We did find about 5 more when we were on the internet, cases where murdered victims actually came back and helped solve their own murder.
The Unsolved
so
Mystery
fascinated
guy.
watching
Do you remember him?
Jessica. We're just watching Jessica trying to get settled in.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix the internet.
Yeah, and we're just sitting here going into paranormal withdrawals because it's that time of year. We don't get cases called in, but come springtime,
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Springtime's when we can go on locations too. It's just
Yes,
too cold to go to some of these haunted locations right now.
Yes, and we've got some stuff in the works, and I'm so excited. Come on, spring and summer, let's get it on. It would be fine with me if we went from Christmas Day, the next day be April 1st.
Mm-hmm.
That would be okay with me, and just skip all these winter months. Some people like winter, but I'm a summer person.
I'm a summer person.
I am a summer person. We actually have spirits in just about every building on our property. So it's not like we're in withdrawals too much. It's just we don't try to communicate with the spirits that are around us here on our property. There's 3 buildings on our property, and the one in the middle seems to be the most haunted. We have had people see shadow people in the back of the building. Jessica's witnessed hearing a little girl giggle in this building. When not long after we moved on this property, I remember I was out in the front yard. I think I was getting something out of the car, And just as a truck went by, this truck slammed on brakes. I mean, he left black marks on the road. And so I'm looking like, what was that about? You know, we didn't have a dog or anything that would run out in the road. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it was a deer. Well, he went down the road, turned around, and came back. And he said, "Are your kids okay?" And I said, my kids aren't home. He said, "Well, yeah, because a little boy and a little girl just ran out in front of me on the street." And he said, "To be honest with you, I closed my eyes and slammed on brakes." He said, "When I got stopped, I didn't see anything." And I said, "No, my children are with their father. They're not here." And I mean, he was just baffled. He said, "I'm telling you, a little girl dressed up in Sunday clothes and a little boy in shorts ran across the road in front of my truck, and I almost ran over them." So within the last, I would say, 2 years, there's evidence of a little girl. Well, there was previous to that a little girl spirit around the property. One of our investigators experienced her one night, and we started hearing a little girl giggle. We had actually, the building that we're in was a location you used to film on the show Repossessed on Hulu, which we are in episode 2, the Cave Spring episode, with our hex box. And part of that show was filmed here. And it seems like since then, this little girl, I don't know if it's the same one from the way back or if it's something new, but sometimes in the building, you can hear a little girl giggle. Several people have heard that. One night, through a speaker, and it was so strong we couldn't see it, but it's kind of like we could at the same time. A ball of some sort of sound came out of one of the speakers, bounced off the wall. I mean, it was like so loud that we were able to distinct that when it came out, it hit the wall and then went to the back of the building. It was a weird sound. Matter of fact, you were up at the front of the church.
Mhm.
To describe this sound, I cannot. But later on, in another part of the building, there was probably about 10 of us here that night. We heard a little girl giggle. We got up. We all went looking. We actually went upstairs um, and looked around there. We thought one of the gentlemen that was here said, "Oh, somebody's squatting in this building. Y'all never go upstairs." You know, so he ran up there to look. Nobody anywhere. But she's been heard. So where she came
Look, her
from, I don't know.
handprints.
Yes, and when Jessica comes to spend the weekend with us, she stays in this building. And I think you had said maybe you had heard that giggle that night, or
We heard the giggle. And then we got up that morning and there were handprints. And they were fresh handprints in the steam of the window, like the droplets were running down. Did I lose Michael and Destiny?
yeah,
No, we're
we
here.
see you.
There seems to be nothing I can do to fix this internet tonight.
Oh well, there's your project for next week.
Good
But
grief.
I guess out of
I'm going to have
all
to kick
spirit
everybody off of it.
children, I guess out of all the different kinds of haunting, children haunts are the scariest. Was that you?
Yeah.
Okay, just
Well,
checking.
there's reasons.
Well, yeah,
You
because
know,
some
like
children's
the
spirits
idea,
are actually children's spirits, so
scary.
Yeah,
very scary.
it is.
Michael and I were investigating a location not far from here. I took you to it one day, and it's actually a little family-owned cemetery, and it's off in the woods. And for years, I didn't know it was there. And then one day, I'm riding by, and I just felt something and looked, and there's a cemetery. I'd never seen it before after all the years we'd lived here. So I told Michael, I said, I've got a place I want us to go visit. And we went there. And of course, it was nighttime when we went back. And I actually connected with a little child spirit, a little girl. And I actually felt her arms reach around my legs. And so soon after that, we left. The next morning, we woke up and we had a child's handprint all in the dust on my car.
Yeah,
I had a
remember
black
that.
car,
That was a long
so
time ago.
it showed any speck of dust. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
But that sincerely happened. And then I had another encounter.
I'm
with
sorry, I have a
child
special guest.
spirit. I didn't hear what she said. I had another encounter with a child spirit.
I have a special guest beside me.
Okay. We were in Franklin, Georgia, and I had dowsing rods in my hand. Michael was trying to show me how to use them, and I'm there and I'm holding these in my hand, and then the end of the rod kept bending down, almost to the point the copper was giving in, and I'm just holding it straight in my hand, and I had felt something hug around me, like just below the waist. And we were standing right by a child's grave. But the dowsing rod was bending over, and I'm still new to investigating the paranormal. And I'm like, Michael, what's going on here? I mean, this thing is bending. There's something tugging on it. And he smiled at me. He's almost laughing. He said, yeah, it looks like you're connecting with a spirit there, baby. And I'm like, well, do something. It's pulling it out of my hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were standing, and this was an old grave. It had the little cobblestones around it and sunken in. And to go back there, I don't even know if I could find it again. But it was very old. And I think and just right down the road was our client's house. And you talk about power lines.
A lot of them.
Lots of power lines running over the cemetery, up the road, over their house, beside their house. Just their residence was completely surrounded by power lines.
A lot of energy.
Yeah. Which can cause illusions and stuff, but that I hadn't been around that power line long enough for us to hallucinate that dowsing rod being turned down toward the ground. It was almost like a child was just curious and just reached up to grab it and say, like, what is this? So
It's very strange that it was bending down.
It was. And, some of the most fascinating things that we have ever encountered in investigating the paranormal, do you even think we'd think to turn a camera on to document this? No. Because some things don't just happen on cue. We had no clue. We actually missed the turn and rode down the road a little bit and saw the cemetery and got out.
Yeah.
Broad open daylight. And again, it doesn't have to be nighttime to have an encounter with a spirit.
No. I know a lot of people play on that 3 a.m. thing at night. That's when they're supposed to be the most active. I've seen spirits active in broad daylight.
Yeah, it seems like demons tend to like that 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Like the mockery thing going along with it. But we're not going to talk about demons tonight.
Or y'all start having internet problems. That's what happens every time.
Yeah. And yeah, for real. We've actually been doing our podcast, and then our producer Stan would tell us, hey, I need to tell you guys something. I heard children playing or talking or giggling in the background while you were doing your podcast. And we're like, yeah, that don't surprise us one bit. Hey, we were doing a live stream. We used to do live streams on our Facebook page, and we started out doing them from our kitchen table. And it wasn't long after my sister passed away. Well, one of my friends was watching the live stream, and the whole time we're talking, and this is probably still on our page somewhere. The whole time we're talking, my sister's voice is talking with us in the background,
I remember that.
commenting on what we're saying.
But we didn't hear it.
No, we didn't hear it at the time.
But people that was watching the live stream heard it.
But our friend Barbara said, after it was over, she called me and she said, you might want to go back and listen to your live stream. And I said, why is that? She said, because your sister was talking with y'all the whole time that y'all were doing the live stream. Hey, Sean, how are you? We are talking spirits, and we've this Greenbrier ghost story has just been fascinating.
That
y'all.
is the Greenbrier ghost story is one of the most fascinating cases I'd ever heard of. I didn't realize, that it was one of the first cases where they allowed paranormal visits or activity as admissible in court.
Evidence in court, and actually, because of that, they found this man guilty of murdering his wife based on a ghost testimony through her mother. If that is not fascinating, I don't know what is.
Jessica probably wouldn't know, but this is probably one of the only cases like that, isn't it?
I believe so. There was a case where someone was claiming that they were demon possessed, and it was Lorraine Warren to testify, but they ended up being struck as witnesses. They wouldn't allow them to testify. So I do believe this is like one of the only times in history that it's happened.
That it was allowed in court.
Yeah. There was a movie that I saw, and I was talking to Jessica about it earlier today. And this movie was based on a true story. And I don't remember the name of it. The time frame was maybe early 80s kind of movie. But this woman actually came back, and I believe it was a nurse. I'm going to research that and find that movie. I'm sure we can find it on one of those many channels that we pay for every month. Somebody's got to have it, Amazon Prime, Paramount, or. And I was looking at all the subscriptions we have to different TV channels, Jessica, and I actually pay for ESPN, expanded cable network thing, and I don't even watch sports. So I think a young Master Joshua Dillon may be behind that one. But it has been a wild hour.
I have ESPN, but it came.
Yeah, he loves to watch football, and that was the only way he could watch some of the games. So I'm guessing that's how we watch. Yeah. How he's able to watch football nearly 24 hours a day on command. Jessica, I'm so glad you're feeling better. I wish you could have been with us on our first live stream last week.
Yeah, it was a good show.
Really was.
I wish I could have, but I would have coughed the whole time.
Yeah, we had a guest lined up, but look at that.
My dog won't leave me alone.
He's like, give me my 15 seconds of fame, Mama. Makes me remember when Addie used to come.
What are you doing?
We was doing a live stream. She would come right up the screen, stick her little head up, see what's going on.
Every time.
I miss my Addie baby so much.
Yeah.
It seems like
this is my Gidget. She's a Chiweenie.
I thought I had actually seen my dog Spirit the other day. My daughter-in-law had a blanket, and that blanket was laid over the recliner where Addie liked to sit. And it's that like fleece inside, and it's white, and it was laid over the chair just like Addie would lay there. I came through the back door, going down the hall, and I caught a glance of it. I had to go back and get another look. I thought it was my Addie baby. It's like I see her all through the house. You know, I expect to see her at the door when I open the door. It's just crazy. It's sadness. But, you know, I'll always miss my Addie baby.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it still hurts. She
Hurts
was my
bad.
baby.
She was a sweetie.
Michael's got her little baby pictures in his phone. I don't want to look at them. I haven't even been out to her little grave because it hurts so bad. But
It'll take some time.
I'm sure her little spirit's just running around here just as free as can be. But anyway, it has been an hour, guys. Fascinating show. Again, I'm glad you're feeling better. Our guest we had scheduled last week was Jereme Leonard, but he works for the fire department. He was on a call. So we're going to get him. Rumor has it he's not feeling well this week. Maybe some sinus issues. So we're going to try to get him set back up and get him on our show with us. Kobe, fresh out of having surgery today, sitting up here like the boss. Kidney stones hurt, don't they?
They do.
They do. He has had all kind of pain meds, and he's still standing. And I don't know how.
I'm not standing for long.
And it's always nice to be sitting beside my handsome Papa Fox over here.
Yes.
Daddy
He agrees with me. Anyway, guys, we're going to sign out.
He knows it.
Next week. We may have a guest next week. It's in the talks right now, but I'll be letting everybody know. Jessica and Kobe, I'll let y'all know later. We're going to put it together tonight. But it's been a wild hour, and we look forward to next week, guys. Till next week, peace and love.